We are going to explore panels, which you may or may not be familiar with or have heard of. And I basically try to go through the basics of panels, show some of the custom pieces that you can do yourself quickly and easily, and then look at some of the extensions to the panels environment that, well, once you're up and running in your Drupal site. Okay. My name is Jason Bell. I have a small business called Start Interaction, and we're a design and development shop in St. Charles, Illinois, just up the river. You can find me as J Bell on Twitter and Jason.Bell on Drupal. And I'm an organizer for the Fox Valley Drupal group and the camp. And it's a long-running joke within the group that I have a love affair with panels. And we don't do it as much anymore, but we used to have long debates about the merits of panels versus using blocks with the context system in Drupal 6 or 7. So panels has a few dependencies that it's important to be aware of, most of which you'll already have installed on your site. Primarily, it's chaos tools or C tools. If you're running views on your site, this is already installed and enabled. To make panels actually useful, you need to enable Page Manager, which is a submodule of C tools. And I will get into what Page Manager is and does. The third dependency is just a little bit of patience, because there's a lot. Panels is big, but it's very powerful, and you can do a lot of really amazing stuff with it if you have the patience to get comfortable. Chaos Tools is a suite of code from Earl Miles, basically to back up everything else that he wanted to do in Drupals. But it provides a lot of really interesting things for us that we can use throughout: views, panels, Page Manager, and a few other things. Plugins, exportables, caching, contexts, modal windows, all kinds of some really helpful stuff that we'll get into a little bit here. I want to talk about Page Manager because I think when people enable it, they get confused. Page Manager is essentially a graphical user interface for Hook Menu. Hook Menu is the hook in Drupal where you create a path in the system. Page Manager allows us to intercept some of the system paths. It's pretty small up there, isn't it? Go one size bigger. Paths like node/node ID or taxonomy term ID or user/user ID. These are all system paths that Drupal owns, and that's where your content and your users exist. To Drupal, behind the scenes, anytime you go to those locations, Drupal will know what to do. And then, of course, you mask that with a clean URL system on the top for the front-end users. You can introduce new paths to the system here. That can be as simple as /home to create a custom home page, or it could be something like node ID network. And then you build this whole suite of tools at that path to exist kind of underneath your node page. Panels, at its core, is a drag-and-drop content manager. It lets you visually design a layout and place content within the layout. If you've spent any amount of time telling your blocks where they should go and sifting them in the order that you want them to display on the block admin screen, and if your site is of a certain size, you'll notice that that admin screen starts to get longer and longer, and I've worked on a site where the block admin page won't even load because there's so many blocks enabled on the site. Context module tried to sort of clean that up by saying, well, let's create some contextual rules that we respond to and say, well, these blocks are here when this is true. Panels allows us to do some similar things. But I think it is hard to understand what panels actually does. So I thought, well, I'll go look at the README file and see what it says. And this is actually what it says. A little documentation should go here, but panels 3 is also a beast. So don't go to the README file. He won't get anything. There is documentation in the handbook, in the Drupal online handbook. There's a whole set of pages on panels. Drupalize Me has great videos about panels. Node 1 has a great series about Page Manager and panels. So the resources are out there. And anybody armed with a search engine and the word Drupal and then whatever they need to find should be able to find something to point them in the right direction. But what does panels actually do? As I was creating this talk, I thought, well, there's sort of like different layers of understanding what it does. It is a rendering handler, and that means that it renders your page for you, just like the theme function in Node module would do. It does essentially replace that for certain things that you tell it. Then I thought about it from where I started as like a themer, right? When you have page TPL PHP open, you have this variable, page content. You've rendered your regions in other places, and then you have one section where you render page content, and that's where your node template takes over, or your term template. And that's essentially what panels takes over. It takes over that variable and what's being spit out there. Let's see. Oh, I have a demo site built. It's called Exploring Panels. I wrote all of these posts by hand in my Latin class in high school. So let's see, I was going to show quickly when you create a custom path. So if I'm going to create a path here at home for my home page, there's a little toggle. It says, do you want to make this site your home page? When you say yes, it makes that setting in site information for you. So you don't have to go and remember to do that. But it asks for a variant type. And this is where panels comes into play as a handler plugin within the system. I can set up a variant for panels. And you'll see there's also a variant called HTTP response code. It does come in handy occasionally where you'll have a path in your site that you want to always redirect somewhere else. And you can set up 301 redirects, 403, 404, all kinds of different response codes. We'll come back to looking at Exploring Panels site in a little bit. But this is just a visual of how Panels interacts with your typical Drupal theme, right? In your typical theme, you have your .info file where you have said, these are my regions, right? So this is a pretty typical site. It has a header region and a footer region and a sidebar region. And this would be the main region or main content. And when we use panels in place of that, this is what it kind of looks like. So your block system still works. Panels works in that main content region. And so we're going to take a look at that on the pages here. So what I have done, and I make sure I reset from the from Wednesday night. So we have, out-of-the-box Drupal. We've got a river of nodes on the front page. This is an article node that is using the default node template and is giving my submitted information, my field image, my field body, and my field tags. And that's great, but I have a really bad design that I need to implement. And so what I want to do is allow panels to take over node rendering. So we will go to Page Manager. Oh, and I should have noted, there's an admin path for pages, which is Page Manager. There's also an admin path for panels, which pretty much looks like this and pushes you over to Page Manager to do everything that you want to do. So if you begin to use this, you'll probably start to default to the Page Manager interface. So I said I wanted to take over the node template, so I'm just going to enable that. And it sends me over to Page Manager and enabled the node template. You can see the one in black. And we'll edit that. This is the primary interface for panels, for Page Manager. We're dealing with the node view path, the node templates here. And what we do with Page Manager is create what are called variants. So variable versions of what displays at this path based on rules that we give. We can give rules based on selection, what kind of node is it, or context. So we have two variants created here. The first one is called article. I've given it an administrative title. I've left the block region blocks on for this page. You can see that you can add and remove CSS classes here. This is a great one to remove no dash sidebar, one dash sidebar, those sorts of things if you need to. Or add a body class. So when the whole page renders, you get a top level class name. You can write CSS code in here, but you shouldn't leave it in here for production. It's great for like when you're prototyping or you want to try something out. You can just write this in. It gets injected in line, but then you should go back and get that into your theme when you can. So I have some selection rules in place. So remember, Drupal is going to node/node ID. And I'm creating this variant so that it knows what to do. So we've gone to node 49, and now I'm going to tell the panel system to only apply this variant for article nodes. You do that by picking from this list of options. Node type, you can see, is here, which I've already selected. And I've said the node that's being viewed is an article, and save. Easy enough. We can load context into the page. Context is another object within your site. This is helpful when you have say a page like we do with tags on it. I think, I'm trying to see if I have that on here. Yes. We have the node that's being viewed as a context by default because I'm on the node page. What I've done here is added the term context, because you'll remember, you will remember, because I talked about it for 2 seconds. There's a field with tags on this node. And so those are entity references to taxonomy terms. I want to use some of that term information on my page, so I load in the context of that term, which gives me access to its its term name, any fields attached to it, and then some of the metadata about it. Then there's the fun part of picking your layout. Panels ships with some layouts for you, single column, 2 column, 3 column. And you can see there's a little picture. We'll talk about layouts a little bit later, I hope. And then content is where the magic happens. This is the panels interface. So we have a panel display that has a top region, 2 equal width columns in the middle, and then a full width bottom column. And I'm not sure if you can see the text here, but I've put the image field at the top, the body of the node to the left, the author tags, and another piece that we'll look at in the right, and then a custom piece of content at the bottom. And I didn't make any changes, but we'll update and save that. And then we'll go look at an article, which now looks terrible, but it's doing what I told it to do. Right? I said I wanted the image at the top, and I wanted the body in the left, and I wanted my author and tag information on the right, and my custom content at the bottom. That's great. Just to highlight where that context information comes into play. Oops. This is a piece of custom content that I'll discuss a little bit later, but in the bottom here, it's not really focused well, is it? It's like a token system, but it uses percents instead of square brackets. So what I've said is underneath my tagline about this being a Fox Valley presentation is that I want the term name and the term description. And so then of a specific term, of this term. And then when my page renders, it actually goes and gets that information and inputs it. So it's placeholder content that gets converted into actual content for you. I thought I turned that thing off. Go away. So there's our panel-enabled node display. And if I come back here and just disable it, we revert back to the node template that's using the manage display settings from the content type editor. All right. I'm happy to talk about this later if I leave you completely confused, but I do want to get through as much as I can. Layout plugins are something that you can provide either in your theme or through a custom module. So that when you're building a panels display, you can have your own custom layout to choose from. It's pretty easy to do. I always do it through my theme, because typically my layouts are specific to a theme that I'm building at this point. So the first thing we do is in our .info file, where you're already telling your theme where your scripts are and where your style sheets are, is you tell it that you have plugins. And that means you have some CTools plugins for it. And what type of plugins? Well, you have panels plugins and their layouts. And then this is the path within your theme directory of where those things are. A custom layout is pretty simple. You can declare a custom layout with layout.inc file and the template. The ping is just a picture for the interface so that you can see what it looks like. And then the CSS is technically optional, but you can provide the layout stuff right there. And so I'll just quickly show what one of those looks like. So here's a site we're working on. Themes. It's a custom theme. It's here. And I have plugins. And I have layouts. And I have one that's called sidebar. If you're a themer and you think you're afraid of PHP, this is really as hard as it gets. Right? I'm declaring a plugin, the title, where's the icon, what is the category. So when I'm on the panel's layout chooser, I can filter by category. What theme, so what template file is called sidebar here. And then what CSS, sidebar CSS is here. You can also specify an administrative template and administrative CSS. And then you declare the regions of your layout. So this is similar to declaring regions in your theme, but what you're doing here is declaring your regions in the template. So we have, in this one, a hero, a primary, secondary, and a tertiary region. And then in our template, which I can open up, this looks like a template file, right? I've given it an article wrapper, some class and ID naming if it's being provided. And then I'm checking, is there anything in that hero region? And if there is, do this. Is there anything in that primary region? Yes, print it out, etc. Ping file, right? Shows you what it looks like. My CSS file is blank because I did my layout styles elsewhere. The admin template is more generic. It's just sort of using administrative language. And then I give it a few styles to say, well, panel 2 and 3 are 50% split. So let's see, re-enable our node template. So this is where category shows up. This is where your image shows up. This is the admin template. Okay. And then these are the regions declared. We can also declare style plugins. The panels, panels, regions, panes, right? Individual objects are panes. You can style a pane in this little drop-down menu. You might have seen it and said, what's that for? Well, it's for styling. These are the defaults. System block, so it would wrap it with things like class block, etc. No markup, which means no wrapping markup for it at all. That one will actually, I think it strips out the title as well. No style, meaning just leave it, and it's gonna give you a bunch of generic pane wrappings that you're not going to want. And rounded corners, which is an old school, like 30 extra divs and 5 images type of rounded corner style plugin. I don't know why it hasn't been removed yet. Style plugins are almost as simple as layout plugins. Again, we have to tell our theme or our module that they exist. And you can see it looks the same, except this time I'm saying styles and not layouts. And a custom style can be as simple as one file, one include file. Okay. So I've got a couple of style plugins that we can look at. I'm in my plugins directory in my theme, and then to styles. I don't know about you, but I often get design files from a designer. And there's like a big color background in the header, and then all of the content is centered here in the middle. And I always say, well, what happens? What happens? What if I'm on a 55-inch HD screen in my living room? What happens at the top? Does that color stop, or does it go on to infinity? And it's always, it goes on to infinity. Oh, of course. Who doesn't want like a brushed gradient going on like for 3 feet on either side of what they're browsing? So you typically then you need something in the middle to contain everything in whatever your max width is. I call that a limiter div. So I wrote a little plugin called limiter. Start limiter, because I had to brand it. All it does is it wraps the panes inside of a div for me, so I can do what I want. So I declare the information about the plugin, what is rendering the region. We can do a render region style. We can also do a render pane style. They're slightly different. One applies to the region, one applies to the individual pane. This one I only use at the region level, right? So I have my theme function, my variables coming in, and I'm setting up new output. I'm starting with a div with a class of limiter. I'm imploding all of the panes inside of there, and then I'm closing it and returning it. Simple. I have a really interesting goes on to infinity color issue in a site that I'm building. Which requires these bands of color. And then the contrast is bad, but there's a little CSS arrow at the bottom of each one, right? All right, but I don't know what the client wants to do there, really. They might want to change colors. They probably will ask to change colors. And I don't really expect them to understand a whole bunch of CSS class names that well, you have to give it this class name. And what does that mean? So I built just a brief UI for it using a style plugin. So I'll show what it looks like on the settings. So that's style. It's called color pane. I basically created this form where they can pick the color that they want. Adjust the header tag, because sometimes we're on a custom page and the first pane needs to be the H1. And then they can give a custom class to the header and a custom class to the pane wrapper for custom styling of the contents inside. So you can see we've turned aqua based on my selection. The arrows don't show up in when you're logged in because of extra wrappers, but so simple, right? They can understand that, right? Pick a color, apply it, saved. So as I was showing this Wednesday, I said, this is not. This is where you start to push me to my edges, so it's probably bad, and somebody could help me make it better, but it's working. I'm setting up a render pane style plugin, but this time I'm declaring a settings form because I need them to input things. So here's the rendering, which wraps, generic class, if they set a custom class, if they set the color class. Then there's my helper limiter div, because now I've got to center that. Right? I need the color to go everywhere, but I need the content to be constrained. Header class, put in here, close everything off. well, here's my settings form, and this is just basic form API stuff. A select for the colors. Here are the options. These are the keys that get used that trigger the style sheet, header tag, so on and so forth. And so then that gives me the ability to have user-controlled styling of their panel panes. Go back to gray. Great. So that's style plugin. Pretty handy. Lots of really good use for it. Semantic panels has been a savior for me. I like pretty clean markup, and I like to keep track of what the, naming things. Yeah?
I had a question for you. Zach, on the previous screen, where you had the
on the browser?
page? Yeah.
This one?
Oh, no. And when you're actually setting up that, the content and
Yeah.
colors?
This one.
Yeah. Were the two text boxes that had the block classes in there, were those just there by default?
No, those are part of my settings form.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so those are things that I've set up in there. Semantic Panels is a style plugin. It's a module, but it allows me to control the wrapper, the content, and the title tag elements, which is great because we don't really like the default stuff. It's all div class pane inner, div class inner pane. Typical, 50 divs deep to keep everybody happy type of thing. This one. So here you can see my style is set as semantic. And here's what that settings form looks like. It's much more in depth. I can set the element on the header. I can add custom classes. I can add other attributes like access key and language and tab index, all kinds of stuff. I can make it a link if I need to. Then I can wrap the content because every pane looks like this. You've got the wrapper on the outside, you've got the header, and you've got the content. Oh, that's a helpful slide that I should stick in, but. And then I can control that wrapper. I can say none. So here I think that says none for the content, because I don't want a wrapper on the content because the content already has a wrapper on it. I don't need an extra div. So that's the main menu that we're looking at. So let's take a look at it here. So there's my nav wrapper that I set with my custom class down here. And there's my header that I said I needed to be an H2 and it needed to have this class. And then here's my menu, which is a list. And I didn't need to wrap it with anything because it's an unordered list. So that saves me the pain of extra divs.
Morton could get away with that. I don't think he can.
A couple sort of advanced pieces, extra pieces that I'll run through real fast. Custom content panes is a sub-module in CTools. It allows you to create custom, exportable, reusable content panes. Why is that great? Well, because it's like a block, but I can export it, and I can put it on a panel display as many times as I want, and in as many places as I want. So when you enable it, it creates this page under structure, custom content panes. You can see in this site I'm going to have a lot because they have a lot of just random marketing text that isn't nodes. Right? It's not node-worthy content. It's just stuff that needs to go somewhere. A content pane form is pretty simple. Admin information for that admin screen. Categories, just to help you categorize things. The categories also show here. So you can see we have a category of content called content pane. If I wrote one that said exploring panels, it would show up in that list. It takes input filters on the body, just like you need. But it also takes those context keywords that we looked at a few minutes ago. So you can, a typical one that I do is I'll create a custom content pane for the copyright notice at the bottom of a site. And I'll load the site tokens, and I'll load in the date. Right? Fieldable panel panes is like a special case of those content panes. Right? That's helpful, title and a body. But what if I had something that I needed to do over and over? Fieldable panels panes, that obviously was a copy and paste slide, allows us to set up our own special pane types and put our own fields on them. So in this site, I have something called an icon box because they have a thing that's an icon and a header and a body text, and it goes, they use it across multiple places on the site, and they'll need to create new ones as they come up with them. So I create a fieldable panel pane that allows me to have a field image and a body image, etc. It's a fieldable panel pane is an entity type, like a node. And then you create bundles of fieldable panel panes. I know I went someplace where some people didn't want to go right there. So that's the coolness of panels. But at some point, I got really tired of the fact that I had to, I'll get to you in a second. I had a page template, and I had a bunch of stuff in the page template that I was coding and keeping track of. And then I had panels, and I was setting it up in panels, and it was back and forth. And I don't know. It'd just be easier if I could do it everywhere, which is why there's panels everywhere, which allows you to completely do away with the block system. And you can turn the block module off. That feels good. And then panels renders your entire site. Okay, so now you don't really need a page template other than to print content. It's the one variable that gets printed out in your page template. You had a question?
Yeah, for the viewable panes.
Yeah.
Is it possible to just integrate that with like beans and just have like a reference?
They're very similar to beans. So the thing, what should I use? If you're kind of going full panels, you probably want to use fieldable panels panes and not introduce beans. It's hard to say. I just kind of like go with all the panels tools. I've used Bean, and it does the same thing. And it's great in its way, and that's getting, most of that's going to be in Drupal 8. So what does panels everywhere look like? If you remember when we enabled panels before, we had our default theme regions, and then panels took this over. When we do panels everywhere, it takes over everything. So we create a new site template panel system path in Page Manager that I'll show. That is what your whole site is. So now I have a region for site header, and a region for site content, and a region for site footer. And within the site content region, that's when panels takes over and renders the different system paths. So that's a pretty typical site template, right? A header, then you've got content, then you've got the footer. I'd say most of the sites we build are some variation on that. So you can see here now I have this this page called site template. Well, it doesn't have a path, right? Because it exists everywhere. And the same thing, you can create variants. So this is my page template right here. I have a header region, I have a content region, and I have a footer region. In the header, I've placed the the site name, site logo, site slogan. That's a special pane. The search form and the main menu. In the main content region, I have messages, right? Because I need help and things like that to show up. And then page content. This pane you have to have in place or your site won't show your nodes or your terms or anything. So, and then the footer, right? You see this one is copyright. That's a custom content pane. And then I print out the logo again. And I'm using my style plugin here, or my style plugin to wrap the things inside the header in that limiter. So my site header, my site content, and my site footer, right? And that's actually backed up by a custom layout called site. That is my site header, my site content, and my site footer. Panels Everywhere allows me to strip a lot of markup out and then gives me a lot of control over what's happening everywhere. I have another client that has 3 domain, we're running domain access. We're running Panels Everywhere. Based on what domain you're on, you get a different site template. Easy enough, right? You could do one site template if you're logged in, one site template if you're not. You could different site templates by geolocation if you want. So I'm getting the hook. So that's Panels Everywhere, and I think that's the most of what I need to show. It's pretty cool. I'm going to just skip through these slides, and I'm happy to talk to you later. I did show when I was demoing, because clients don't understand that interface at all. Oops, I missed one. Panels IPE, in-place editor. It allows us to have these little buttons at the bottom of our screen, right? And they just click that, and they can edit stuff, pick stuff up and move it, add stuff, whatever they want. It's a nice tool. Adds more overhead to your project, of course. Panels has plenty of helpful modules out there. These slides are available, so don't scramble to write them all down. Panelizer allows us to provide default layouts. So every node should look like this, or every article node should have, content, metadata, whatever. But 1 in 10 articles get special treatment and needs a custom variant. Panelizer allows us to provide the default plus the override capabilities. And that's it. And I'm happy to answer questions. And I'm done.